Hello and welcome. Welcome to our video on fragmentation. Today, we're going to see how aware of our parts we can become. And most of us have never even known that we had parts. So hopefully this is going to be eye-opening for you. Hopefully you'll feel how much improvement this is going to bring into your relationship in your life.
It's common to look at oneself as one cohesive unit. That said, if you zoom in, you'll find that you're more like a mosaic. There's many different parts of you. For example, have you ever noticed how you have different moods? You might wake up in one mood and go to bed in another. Throughout the day, you might go through 5, 10, or 20 or more different moods.
Each of these moods is actually us operating from a different part. Have you ever noticed how when you look at the world through one mood or part, it looks one way, and when you look at it through another, it can look a completely different way, kind of like a lens? Well, parts are very much like lenses. They can distort reality, like a green lens can make everything look green. When we're operating from one part, the world might look all gray, muddy, and terrible, like we're failing and not doing anything right. Well, when we look at it through another part, it might look really great, like we're succeeding and doing excellent. Well, that's because each part actually has its own set of beliefs, feelings, perspectives, and ways of interacting with the world.
Isn't that fascinating? We tend to consider ourselves as one person, yet in a way, there's a bunch of different little me's inside of us.
We all have these different parts running in our systems. Oftentimes, we have many parts running at a time. These different parts can pull us in many different directions. Because they each have their own fears, beliefs, and ways of operating, they can create a lot of inner conflict. And when we're trying to achieve something, they can pull us in the other direction.
For example, when we're trying to lose weight, they can think about our favorite dessert and say, we have to have it. Have you ever heard these voices in your head before? They might come up while we're exercising and say something like, I just want to go home and watch TV. They might also come up while we're meditating and say, I wonder what I'm going to do tonight. They might come up at work and say, I hate my job. This is so boring. They might come up in a relationship during a fight and say, I can't be in this relationship anymore. They might come up in regards to money and say, I'll never have the life that I want. They might come up in regards to ourselves and say, I hate myself, or I'll never be good enough.
These voices can be frustrating. These parts can really limit our ability to remain focused on and achieve our goals. When we have parts that have fears or limiting beliefs, it can feel like we're playing tug of war with ourselves or swimming up current. If you've ever tried to use positive affirmations in your life, you've likely encountered different parts of yourself that really want to stay stuck in the negativity.
It's common for us to try to use more positive parts to overpower our unwanted parts. Unfortunately, doing this can sometimes increase our level of fragmentation and increase the feeling of playing tug of war within ourselves. So, have you ever had the experience of trying over and over to get a thought out of your head by trying to replace it with something better? This process can be really exhausting.
It can lead to feeling deep frustration, vulnerability, out of control, powerlessness, anger, and hatred within ourselves. And some parts even have desires that don't match our intentions. In fact, many parts do. These desires can lead us to feeling confused, guilty, and even doing things that don't match our highest and best good. That often happens. We might have a thought or emotion that scares us and makes us think, where did that come from? And have you ever had that experience where you have this crazy thought and you're like, oh my gosh, what was that? Well, in addition to all that, different parts can also want to stray from our marriage, get angry at our spouse, or even spend money recklessly when ultimately our true self doesn't want to do any of those things. This fragmentation can lead to impulsive decisions, temptation, inner conflict, and mistakes, quote unquote, that can have a serious impact on our lives. When you're in a part and you say things like, oh, this relationship will never work, not all of you feels this way. This is just a gut reaction that one part gets triggered and it says, this relationship will never work. Not all of you feels this way. 10 minutes later, an hour later, a day later, a week later, you're like, wow, I really think this relationship can work, and I'm really happy to be in this relationship. I'm really happy that we didn't separate after that fight. So when these parts come up, they never represent all of you. Not all of you feels this way, and you don't feel this way all the time. So remembering the temporary nature of parts when they come up and they activate is really important, because it prevents you from believing that part's opinion on the world is real and then acting upon it, because that can do a lot of damage. If you acted from the part that says this relationship can never work and you filed a divorce, well, even if a week later you didn't want to get the divorce anymore, imagine how much pain and trauma and damage you've done to the relationship by filing that divorce. Imagine how your wife or husband would receive that. And that's going to continue to play a role in your relationship over time. So operating from parts can be really costly sometimes. And when you operate from that part, the entire world can look that way. It's like a lens that you see from, and everything looks, it's like if it's a green lens, everything looks green. Well, if it's a part, everything looks like what that part believes. How many times are those parts proven wrong? Those parts that say, oh, this relationship can never work. Next week, we're back in the relationship. Oh, we have no money. Well, next week, we're doing all right, and we make a nice purchase. And then the following week, something happens, and then we're back to, oh, we have no money. Or we're back to the relationship can't work. And then letting that influence our decisions. These parts are simply projecting our fears. And that means that they're not useful to make decisions from, because they're not really understanding what's going on. They're just getting triggered when we feel fear.
Whether you're here because you want to find a relationship, improve your existing relationship, make more money, lose weight, better manage an emotional, physical, or mental condition, or achieve any other goal, realizing that you have different parts and that the people around you also have different parts can be very enlightening and help you make breakthroughs with your intentions.
And just because you think a thought or feel an emotion doesn't mean it directly represents who you are. None of these parts that we have actually represent who we really are. They don't represent who you are at the level of your soul. You don't have to judge yourself for whatever temptation, thought, or feeling you may have felt guilty about in the past. Judging it certainly isn't going to help. It's just a part, and it's a part that you can release. It means nothing about the child of God that you really are deep down inside. Any part of you that feels like something is permanent and will never change is also just a part that can be released. Of course, everything and anything can change.
In addition, if you feel inner conflict about a relationship or any endeavor in your life, it's okay. Just because you feel like you should quit, that something isn't right, or that you don't feel in love, doesn't mean that you have to react to that feeling as if it's real or true. The feeling might just be a fear-driven projection. Our parts have the capacity to feel fear and project all sorts of beliefs about our lives that could lead us to steer away from something we deeply want to achieve. Being aware of this process allows you not to fall victim to it.
Sometimes certain parts of ourselves can become dominant over other parts of ourselves. And these parts can obscure the other parts and therefore obscure certain feelings that we used to feel or make us feel something totally different than that which we want to feel. If you're in a relationship where you or your partner don't feel the love anymore, this could definitely be going on. If you feel a lack of passion, meaning, or fulfillment towards anything in life, this could definitely be going on. And if you're trying to achieve something, but you still feel a part of you pulling you in the opposite direction, well, this is most likely happening.
Different parts of ourselves can feel intense anxiety, stress, worry, fear, confusion, guilt, jealousy, distrust, low self-esteem, feelings of worthlessness, and other disempowering things. When these parts become dominant, everything about us and our lives can feel that way. We can accidentally assume that those feelings represent who we are or something concrete about our lives when they don't. Believe it or not, when you release these parts that aren't aligned with your conscious intentions, you can tap into the feelings you want to feel and achieve your goals. You really do have the personal power to create the life that you want and feel the feelings that you want.
We worked with a fellow who was having difficulty moving on from a divorce. He felt guilty about dating again, even though his wife was the one who decided to break it off. He had a part that believed that it was wrong of him to date new women because he was unsure about whether he was ready for a serious commitment, and this belief was making it hard for him to go on dates and enjoy them. You can see how such a dynamic would create a serious blockage in terms of finding a new relationship. You can see how it would also create significant inner conflict, anxiety, and negative emotions that could affect him at different times throughout the day. Well, we helped this fellow become aware of this part and release it. And when he did, he found a new feeling of freedom and capacity to move on from the divorce. He became free to date and move on with his life.
We also worked with a lady who was in a relationship with a male who was controlling and exhibited some narcissistic tendencies. One part of her felt suffocated in her relationship, while another really wanted to be a good wife. That part that wanted to be a good wife would feel guilty whenever she did something for herself. The part that felt suffocated would get angry whenever he tried to control her. This inner conflict made it really hard to communicate effectively with her husband. By simply becoming aware of these parts, their fears, and their projections, she became empowered to communicate with her husband from a new place of clarity and understanding that allowed her to permanently shift those dynamics. Her husband also benefited from this because his codependent controlling tendencies were actually preventing him from taking accountability for his emotions. When she shifted, he was able to shift too.
Identifying and releasing our limiting parts can benefit ourselves and others profoundly. It can have comprehensive benefits and positive effects in every area of our lives. And when we're fragmented in all these different parts, we inevitably have difficulty staying on track with our deepest intentions in life. It can even feel hard to identify what our deepest intentions are when we're divided in this way. Well, as we start to understand our different parts, we gain the capacity to release them and become more integrated and whole.
This leads to more clarity, better relationships, more goal achievement, fulfillment, joy, and inner peace. Think about your...
I'm just teasing you.
It was finished?
Yes, it's done.
Before